Hi, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by ASQ's Acadiana Southwest Section 1423. I am Kayla Myers, educator and VOC for the ASQ Section 1423, and I'll be your host today. Those who are unfamiliar with the American Society for Quality, ASQ is a global leader in quality and consists of a community of passionate people who use their tools, ideas, and expertise to make the world better. ASQ Acadiana Southwest Section provides free local training and events to our community. Today's webinar is on how to effectively plan and execute different types of audits, presented by Mr. Joseph Wiltz, who has worked in the oil and gas industry for over 45 years. He has 30 years experience in the design and development of different quality management systems. He has over 25 years experience in auditing and training. Within the last year, he has conducted over 300 audits. Currently, he is an approved trainer for API-U to facilitate courses on API Q1, Q2, and lead auditor. He also serves as performance evaluator for API, which includes evaluating their contracted auditors and completing assessments and recommendations of the audit protocol. In addition, he is also a certified lead auditor and skills examiner through Exemplar Global, formerly known as RAB. I am very excited to present to everyone Mr. Joe. Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start.
Okay, very good. We'll get started. First and foremost, thanks very much, Ms. Kayla, for giving me this opportunity. Years ago, I used to do these type of meetings a lot, and it just so happened that I stopped for some reason. So thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate you putting the faith in me to help represent the American Society for Quality and local chapters. So that really means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. My experience that I'm going to talk to you about throughout this whole process is experience that I've learned hands-on over the last 30, 40 some years in being able to do audits. Basically, I'll just mention a couple of things about effective audit planning. It starts with the requirement of the ISO 19011. So that's who API, that's the standard API uses to train auditors, and most organizations will follow the ISO 19011 guideline. So that's the guidelines that we'll be following, some of the things that I'll be talking about. But most of what I'll be talking about is kind of hands-on, some of the tips and tricks you learn, what you should do first, what you should do second, which may be a little different as to how standard or some of the guidelines will actually write the process, but it's everything that's covered, everything that's required, but it's just kind of trying to create a roadmap of this is what you do first or this is what you do second. So the basis for this is basically going to be the ISO 19011 standard that was last revised July of 2018. Also from different audits that I've conducted over the years, 300 plus with API, as well as probably an additional 300 conducting first party and supplier audit, mainly for major oil and gas operators. So that's what we're going to do. The objectives basically, as it stated, is to effectively plan, execute, and complete value-added audits that identifies continual improvement opportunities, eliminate risk. Risk is a very big part of auditing, especially with the new revised ISO standard that was revised in 2018. Risk is mentioned pretty much throughout the whole standard. So risk is a very big thing. A lot of companies have included risk to some degree in their audit program, but it's becoming more mandatory that you really identify those risks, as well as prepare organizations for all customer and third-party audits. Whenever I do API audits, I used to tell clients that I was actually helping prepare them for the real audit. That's the customer audit. That's the audits that we definitely do not want to fail under any condition. So that's an important audit in my book. So basically, we want to just to show you some different techniques to accomplish that. Okay, purpose of auditing, basically to determine whether activities and related results comply with planned arrangements, whether these planned arrangements are implemented effectively and are suitable to achieve objectives. So At the end of the day, we're looking for evidence of conformity or evidence of non-conformity. So and we'll get to that in some slides coming up, but basically at the end of the audit, we want real good, clear evidence that client, the facility that we're auditing has clearly met the requirements, and we're showing it in a documented process, which we'll be going over. And if they're not meeting the requirement, then basically we're going to document evidence of non-compliance. When we get to the report section, you'll see the value of a well-written report. That is the real true value to the customer, having a good report, but that starts with the actual planning. We have to plan towards the end, basically from day one. Okay, next slide. Okay, just briefly, some of the benefits of auditing, closer alignment with compliance standards. There's a reason we're doing an audit. Sustainable business practices, identifying gaps and unnecessary waste. It's okay to do things correctly. Okay, that's great, but it's even better when we could do things correctly and eliminate all of these non-value added steps, all of these redundant steps, these steps that's adding unnecessary waste or potential risk into the process. So auditing helps us to streamline those processes to where at the end, we're really giving the client, the facility we're auditing, a very, very good value-added audit. So just a couple extra things that I'm going to add here is we have the identifying gaps and unnecessary waste. We're going to talk about risk throughout, as I mentioned a couple of slides ago, really identifying not only the risk to the actual performance of the audit, but the risk to the audit program, because everything starts with a good audit program, having an audit procedure, having all of the proper forms and documents, competence, training of auditors. So there's a whole package that first is assembled that chances are you guys probably have already. It's never too late to tweak it and modify it, especially with the new revision of ISO 19011-2018. It could be a good time to go back and look at it to really make sure that we're meeting those requirements. Also, another benefit of auditing is it helps us to really take a good look at the inputs and the outputs. Every section, every department is going to have inputs that they're receiving. Something's going to happen in that department, and then there's an output that has to meet a certain requirement that then has to be sent to the next area. I mentioned earlier that our goal is to do things correctly, but in addition to that, we want to make sure that we eliminate all of these non-value added steps in that process. The process is a lot more effective when you have 5 effective steps versus 7 or 8 steps, and where maybe you have a couple of them that's really not adding any true value. And also another really great benefit is identifying legal requirements. Throughout the new Q1, Q2 standard, you'll see the word legal requirement on almost every page of the standard. So legal requirement is a big one. That's what I see as sort of an ongoing learning curve, because you may not know every last legal requirement. They're popping up, they're being revised, they're being modified. There's so many of them, but the more in tune we are with our business, the better off that we'll be, because at the end of the day, we're learning. This is about continuous and our continual improvement. Okay, Audit Authority. And we're talking about effective audit planning, and in my mind, this is where the planning really starts. Okay. There's a lot of things you're doing. You're going to have your audit program, so you're following the guidelines of your program, your procedure, whatever policies, conflict of interest statement, qualification for the auditors. So all that's going to be important. But this is where the planning really starts. The way my mind works is, first we're going to receive some type of audit authority. In the case of an API, third-party auditor audit, then our authority would basically be API sending the information to one of the auditors, clearly telling us where we're going, why we're going there, what we need to accomplish, the timeline that we're going to work within. And they are getting that authority through the original licensing agreement that the client signed, which covers their registration and our monogram program, depending on what program they have under the API umbrella. So that's where the audit authority for a first party internal audit, or even a second party supplier audit, that authority will probably come from the quality department or someone in higher up management. So it starts there. I'm starting my planning right at that point because I've got to make sure that I've got the right information so I know exactly where I'm going, why I'm going there. Is there a certain time frame? Is this an announced audit? Is it an unannounced audit? And that depends on how your facility is set up. Your procedure may have a section that talks about the authority to have unannounced audits, which API does on a fairly regular basis. That's where there's a reason for those. And we basically just show up, knock on the door and say, hey, we're here and we're ready to get started. So there's no law or rule that says you can't do that, but you definitely want to make sure that in your audit program that you're adjusting and documenting exactly how you're going to do that. So starting my planning here, whether I document it in hard copy documents, electronic, maybe there's going to be a combination of everything. That's where I'm going to start. And I'm probably going to start by issuing an audit number. Okay, I want to start this. You may be doing one audit at a time, or you may not be quite so lucky where you may end up having to do 2, 3, 4, 5 audits all at the same time, where this one is in the early stages, this one is starting next week, this one was completed 2 weeks ago, and now we're waiting to complete all of the findings and corrective actions. It makes it a little trickier. So we want to start here by knowing exactly where we're going. We've got clear information from the authority. We have an audit number, and that's when we're starting to formulate how we're going to be able to do this. Okay. The deliverables. Okay. Once again, it's what I'm telling you is based off of my experience from having conducted 500-600 audits over the years. If you read certain standards, ISO 19011, for example, some of the formatting or some of the steps may not be in alignment with the steps that I'm talking about. So at the end of the day, you go back and formulate the plan and the process, sort of the step-by-step, the way it works best for you, okay? What I'm stating is the way that it's been working best for me, and probably is going to add some value to you as well. But go back and tweak it after this presentation is over with. So, well, you know what? We like to do things a little different, or we may have a legitimate reason why we need to address deliverables at this point. We need to reach the audit team at that point. That's what keeps a business going. So, audit deliverables. I've got my authority. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that I really understand where I'm going, why I'm going there for, and what exactly I'm going to need to be able to show evidence that I have met those requirements. I need to learn a little more about this audit. So I'm going to review documents. I'm going to review records. I'm going to review performance of different key personnel, different auditors I may want as part of my audit team. There's different objective evidence from last audit. Now I'm just kind of brainstorming, but this is the second big piece of my audit planning, because I'm starting with the audit authority, and that's going to be documented. I am really making sure that I understand what those deliverables are and what it's going to take to be able to meet those deliveries. So I'm looking ahead, my audit team, certain skills, certain knowledge. Is this an audit that's going to require special processes? Maybe I need a subject matter expert. Is there a second shift or a third shift? Maybe I'm going to look at a very specialized coding process, and that process is only run or only accomplished on the late shift that starts at 11 p.m. Okay, so I'm learning. I haven't reached out to my team. I don't even have a team at this point. I haven't reached out to the client. I'm just doing my homework, making sure I can fulfill and have all the tools in place to be able to meet the deliverables which came from the Audit Authority. What the customer requires, I'll have all that information. Okay, now at this point, I've got enough information to where now I can start reaching out to my audit team. I recommend you reach out to your team and put your team together way before you even think about reaching out to the client. Okay, at the authority, got a pretty good idea of what my deliverables are and what I'm going to need to accomplish that. So now I'm going to start that planning. I'm going to reach out to 2, 3, 4 potential auditors. I'm looking at the skills that's going to be needed, the shifts. There may be traveling involved, maybe an audit in Oklahoma, and maybe one of the auditors is going to come from California. So I'm looking at all of that. Okay? I'm not going to get too deep at this point. I'm just trying to make sure that I have the personnel and the skills from the team that's available. So I'm going to reach out to the team at this point. And I'm going to just give them kind of a summary. Once again, I received the authority. I'm going to make sure they understand that I'm not just going to do this because I want to. I'm authorized for this. I've got a good understanding of what I'm going there for. So now this is going to be discussed with the team. And all I'm trying to accomplish at this point is to get a couple of dates from them. 2, 3, 4 potential dates, and to get them to hold those dates. And we're going to talk a little about some of the logistical support, but that's going to be several steps and several layers into the process. Now I'm going to reach out to the client to sort of give them their first real good update, because I've got enough information now to where now I could reach out, let them know we're authorized to do this audit. This is the deliverables that we intend on accomplishing. This is going to be our audit team. The audit is at this point, until we confirm a few more things, it's scheduled for 4 days on site. And we're just trying to make sure that the set of dates is going to be acceptable for them. Okay? And there's going to be some discussions that's going to start about opening meeting, closing meeting, just basically just trying to give them a heads up that if it's necessary to reserve a meeting space, which some larger facilities you have to reserve the meeting space, I'll kind of give them a little idea about that. And there may be certain documents, if allowed by my company and if allowed by the company I'm auditing, I may request a copy of the quality manual, maybe copies of previous findings, maybe copies of procedures. And then I'm sort of sitting back at that point, kind of at a standstill, because now I'm waiting for the client to tell me which day, date, or set of dates that they were able to accept. That may take a couple of hours. That may take 2, 3, 4 days of reaching out to the different teams. Okay, next one. Okay, now I'm being busy. This is going to be my busy work. I'm going to hear from the client eventually, probably right in the middle of this. I'm going to get an email from the client that says my first choice is November 12th to 16th. Okay, I'll let them know that should work. I'll get back in touch with you. I'm going to reconfirm with my team. Everything's fine. Pencil it in. This is the date we're going for. It's confirmed. It's scheduled. I'll reach back to the client. Everything's okay. Everything's scheduled. Now, I've just gotten out of the way, but for me, can only speak for myself, has been one of the biggest headaches over the years, trying to make sure that the audit team and the client are all on the same page and we all have the same dates. I may be 1 day into my planning at this point. I may be 2, 3, 4 days into my planning, but I have to get that out of the way before I can move forward. Now I'm going to get to my critical information, where I sort of looked at a little earlier because I needed to better understand the deliverables, but now I'm going to study it a lot more because I have to eventually put together an audit plan. I'm still a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks from putting together my audit plan at this point. But I've got enough information. I've got my date commitment. I've got an idea of what happened last audit. I know what my deliverables are. Now I'm working with the team. We're making sure that we understand different sections. We may have to have a certain person do a certain area for, because of different skills and technical abilities. Maybe we're auditing a welding process. Well, maybe my welding expert on the team is the person that's going to do that. Maybe this company has a very complicated process for purchasing and actually had two findings last time. Well, I've got a member of my team that just so happened to be a former purchasing manager. Well, I may assign that to him. So I'm starting to kind of play with how I'm going to do this. And I'm mainly going to be going back and forth with my team right now. It's just double checking things, triple checking things. We mentioned earlier the logistics. That's kind of being worked on in the background. Okay. Hopefully I've got enough time to do this the way I want, and it's not a rush deal where I'm down to a couple of days before audit day. Hopefully I've got 2, 3, 4 weeks, or maybe even a couple of months. So I'm reviewing all of this. I mentioned earlier about requesting certain documents. Well, I may want to request some more. At a minimum, I like to have a copy of the organizational chart. It's kind of something simple. I don't need no big, massive sheet, something simple. A layout of the facility, if they could supply that. What are their special processes? Or is of those special processes, which ones are performed in-house and which ones are actually subbed out to a third party? All of that is going to help me to better put together my audit plan. I'm not there yet. I'm slowly getting all these pieces together. I'm getting information from the team. I may give the client an update, just letting him know this is what we're working on. There's some extra documents I would like to request. And also, I just thought of it, is there any final inspection taking place on the second shift? Because we'd like to maybe get the end of the second shift and the beginning of the third shift together. Second shift may end at 11 p.m. Third shift may start at midnight. So maybe I could have my night auditor there from 10 to maybe 2 that morning. So I'm starting to get some information, as I need, so I can better understand. Okay, different tools and techniques. I'm getting closer to having my audit plan. But I'm making sure that I've got my ducks in a row. At a minimum, we're going to need a hard copy of your sign-in roster. Okay, at a minimum. I've gotten caught over the years where, for whatever reason, I didn't print it, and I need to reach out to the client with it on the thumb drive for them to print a copy for me. During audits, we want to be very professional, and we want to prevent embarrassing situations. Okay? We don't want anything to go wrong. We don't want anybody holding anything negative over our head. So we're going to plan right. We're going to make sure we have a hard copy roster. We know we're going to need that. We're going to need a checklist just to keep us on track as far as what we're going to cover during the opening meeting, and also later when we end the audit, what we're going to cover during the closing meeting. So I'm going to have that checklist, which is going to keep me on track. I want that in hard copy as well, too. My audit plan, I like for myself and my audit team to all have a hard copy of the audit plan. During the opening meeting, I'm going to be writing on that audit plan. Things going to change. I may have to audit this person Wednesday morning instead of Tuesday afternoon. That's what keeps me on track throughout the audit, is my audit plan. So I want that as a hard copy. Audit report, that's your call. My recommendation is, if you can type it in, you have an electronic copy with a computer, a power cord, battery pack, whatever you think you may need. You've got to watch it with these tool bags, because sometimes they get so heavy you could barely lift them. But we want to make sure we have enough tools to accomplish the audit. At a minimum, you want a hard copy of your audit plan. Something goes wrong with your computer, and all of a sudden you maybe lost some information. How often you save your information. So all that's going to be looked at. So your roster at a minimum, your opening closing meeting checklist, your audit plan, and a audit report, two-sided, print on two sides. That way it's only 15, 20 pages and not 50, 60. You have a copy of that. Sampling techniques, it depends on what you're most comfortable with. You may want to kind of pre-write certain questions, so when you go in an area, you know exactly what questioning that process that you want to follow. Conflict resolution, depending on how complex your program is, you may or may not need some extra document or some extra record, procedure, anything, just to really make sure that everybody understands the conflict resolution process. Majority of the time, you're probably not going to need anything, but I wanted it here just as a reminder that, conflicts could come up. So we want to make sure that we're addressing them in accordance to our company procedures and guidelines. So at a minimum, we may just want an electronic copy with us. So if and when we get to that point, we're ready for it. One other thing I'll throw out as far as sampling techniques, whatever works best for you. What I like to do is first get a chance to read or at least skim through the procedure and our work instruction for the area that I'm going to. Okay. Probably the number one thing you're going to have to worry about during audits is to stay on schedule. Okay. Stay on schedule. We don't want to be 10, 15 minutes late, and we don't want to be 10, 15 minutes ahead. So you prioritize your time. Little trick that I use is I allow myself enough time to read and understand the procedure and the work instructions. I don't have to read the standard because I know the standards. I've read that a few times already. So when I get in the area I've prioritized in my mind basic, and I may write it down. I used to do this. I rarely write right now, but I may write maybe just 2 or 3 kind of at the last minute. So I know that at a minimum, I need to find out these things at a minimum. And I could probably have a fairly credible report if I have at least this information that shows me evidence that they're in conformance to the requirements, evidence they're in conformance to their documented procedures and work instructions. If I have that, and I have enough evidence to really show evidence of conformity, I probably got a pretty decent audit report, which is my deliverable. A deliverable has to be worth something, okay? And that's what it's going to be, that report. Now, if I'm able to get more information, that's going to add even more value to my report. But I may not have the time or the luxury that I need to get that extra information. Kind of depends on how much time I used up with my reviewing of procedures, as well as getting my really, really critical things. Maybe there was a finding I had to follow up on. So you just kind of prioritize your time and your area of what you need. We know we need to review their procedure. We know we need to make sure that we see evidence of conformity to the procedure and or the standard requirements. There may be some extra things that if I don't have these extra pieces, I think I'm going to have a pretty valuable report that I really want to try to get them, because it's going to add even more value in the form of more objective evidence. So you want to watch your time very, 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 very closely. Okay. And last thing on this slide here is that's mentioned real quick is team reviews, the audit plan set to client. So we're going to get to that. All what we're doing here is we're just getting things ready so I can get that audit plan. Okay, I'm just about ready to put together my plan. Okay, sorry. Okay, next one is opening meeting. Opening meeting, I am going to be discussing that audit plan, because I'm somewhere, it kind of depends the facility. I may want to send them an audit plan 1 to 2 weeks before I get there. It kind of depends on the facility that you're auditing. It depends on what your requirements are. API perspective, we try our best to do that at least 10 to 14 days prior. So the previous slide, we talked about gathering all this information. Well, the end result of that previous slide is I was able to put together an audit plan. Now, I'm going to review it with my team before I send it to the client and before we even get to that open meeting. I'm going to review that. So I left that item out on the last slide. Sorry about that. So we're going to review it. It may take some back and forth. I need to make sure everything looks right and we've got all the time that we need. Team approves of it. We're all on the same page. I sent it to the client. Client said, yep, everything looks good. Okay, we're all set. Now I'm pretty much done at this point. In the background, I'm still reviewing everything. We're still talking. The team and I still making sure we have everything in order. I'm still reaching out to the client for maybe some additional information. I may be working on some logistical thing, hotels, plane tickets, other things in the background. But now we're ready for the opening meeting. We talked about the forms on the last one as far as the planning that we would have with us. I've got all my package. I've got extra ink pens. Maybe, just maybe, I may need a flashlight or a magnifying glass at some point. So got everything with me. We've scheduled the opening meeting. Now we have to start making sure we follow our audit plan. I'm going to introduce everyone at the table in the conference room. We're going to introduce our team members. You know, we'll kind of give them another idea, a good summary of why we're there. We'll talk about different work areas, different PPE requirements. We'll remind them about the need to have guides. We'll talk with, and we've been kind of questioning them about this all along, but now we'll kind of finalize. Is there areas where we're going to need translators? Is there areas we're going to need subject matter experts? Okay. We've been talking about it all along, but this is like the last opportunity to really make sure we've got that fine-tuned. You know, one note of caution is just be real careful, and I've had it happen from experience over hundreds of audits. Who exactly do you want as your translator? If you're if you're interviewing a machinist, for example, do you want the senior machinist who's been there for 20 years as your translator, or would you prefer the young lady who just started in purchasing last week? They both speak a second language and they both speak it effectively. Okay, which one would you want? I probably 99 out of 100 is going to go with the purchasing, because all I want is an accurate translation. I don't have to be concerned with what additional information is being added in by this expert. I know that I'm dealing with someone who doesn't work in that department. So there's a chance my translation may be closer to what the machinist is actually telling me. And trust me, the more you audit, the more you get really, really picky and paranoid about these little things, because you'll learn things from experience. So we want to make sure we pick that. Who exactly is our subject matter expert? Okay. Do we even have a choice of who that person's going to be? We'll talk again about lunch arrangements. You know, we typically do working lunch. Working lunch is good. It gives you a chance to keep going. You know, it gives you a chance to kind of review things with the team. Sometimes it saves you a lot of trouble. Now, if you're in some place where it's very easy to just run down the road and get something, that's one thing. It's another thing when you're in a very large facility where you've got to go through several layers of security before you can even get back to the parking lot or to the parking garage. So all of that would then be looked at. Okay, that's it for opening. Okay, throughout the course of the audit, we talked about some of the different tools. We know that we're working on an audit report that we've agreed is our deliverables. Okay, and give me a second. Wait 1 second. Let me make sure that. Sorry about that. Okay, had to get a, speaking of power, have to get an additional power backup just to be safe. During the course of the audit, we're going to be looking at different things. At the end of the day, we're looking for evidence of conformity. So whatever I write in the report, either I'm showing proof that they're doing it or proof that they're not meeting the requirements. So probably 95% of my report is basically going to be evidence of conformity or evidence of non-conformity, pretty much. But there's some other things that could come up and probably will come up during the audit. One is raising a finding. You've got to be real careful with this one. Writing effective findings and our concerns. We know that at a minimum, a good, well-written finding requires three things. We need a requirement. I can't just say you have to do this because I say so. That's not how it works. So I have to understand the requirement. The better that I've learned and studied the requirement, the better I think I'll be, or anyone will be during the course of the audit. So before I write a finding, I need to know the requirement. I need to have evidence showing exactly why they're not meeting that requirement. And then I'll need to write up that nonconformance. So writing up the nonconformance is basically going to be stating exactly why I'm writing this finding. So we're going to have these three things: how and when to review it with client. That's your call. That depends on how your company policy is set up, or it may even depend on the client or the place that you're auditing or the reason that you're auditing. If I have the luxury of not saying anything right away, I'll let them know that I need to go back and check something. I need to follow up on some procedures. For right now, this is going to be an audit trail. Let me get back with you later today or after lunch, maybe by the end of the day. That gives me a chance to double check, make sure I've got the right requirement, make sure my objective evidence is correct. And it also gives me a chance to write the whole finding out 100% before I say one word to the client about it. In a perfect world, that's how we auditors like to operate. That way, when I start discussing it with the client, I'm not fumbling and looking for things. I've actually have identified the requirement. I've actually identified the exact objective evidence I've looked at, and I've actually written exactly why it is a finding. So I don't always have that luxury, but if I have it, I prefer to go back, double check things, write the finding correctly, and then follow with the client and said, okay, out on the shop floor, I mentioned that there was an issue I was following up on that I didn't look quite right, and I needed some time to study it just a little more. I think I'm at the point where I can classify it. Unfortunately, this is going to be a minor finding, and let me tell you why. Then I'll review the requirement, I'll review the objective evidence, and I'll state exactly why it is a non-conformance. And usually I've got it so clear and so spelled out where usually there's very little discussion at that point, and we're able to keep going. Opportunities for improvement, prescriptive, non-prescriptive. That ties back in with your policy. It's, if a third-party registration body, API, any of the others, is out conducting an audit, there's going to be opportunities of improvement mentioned in your report, but we're not allowed to tell you how to do it. We'll be able to say, based off of what we've seen, this process appears effective, but there appears to be several non-value added steps in this process. So by reviewing and fine-tuning the process, eliminating the non-value added steps, that's less of a risk. That's 3-4 potential risks we may have eliminated. But I can't tell them exactly how to do it. If it's a first or second party audit, you may have the luxury to where you may be able to tell them exactly how to do it. Okay, and it depends what your policy is. Handling serious findings that requires immediate attention. The second bullet point, how and when to review findings with clients. I mentioned the way we like to do it in a perfect world. Well, sometimes it doesn't work that way, and it's not always that perfect world scenario. So I may see something, for example, I may see someone using a torque wrench in final inspection because a nut has to be tightened or fastened to a certain torque value. There's no sticker. The technician really couldn't give me a good answer on how he verified that torque wrench was within calibration. Okay, something like that, I'll probably have to sort of stop the process and let them know exactly what's what, so they have a chance to correct it before they continue to use that torque wrench on product after product after product and just shipping it out the doors. This gives them a chance to correct the problem, basically stop the bleeding, and to implement some type of safeguard. They may not be able to do the corrective action at all, but at least a correction. Get it out of final inspection, get another torque wrench that we know meets all of the right values, it's calibrated, it's up to date, but the whole works. So some situations, you've got to kind of use your judgment there of exactly how you will address that. Okay, closing the audit. Well, we talked earlier about the authority. After the authority, I have to figure out my deliverables. Okay, my deliverables is at the end of the day, this is what I'm going to give them. Companies spends a lot of resources to prepare for audits. They're counting on these audits to keep them in line with customer audits and everything else. They're counting on these audits to add extra value in helping them to identify opportunities for improvement. So I got to make sure that my deliverables is a report that is really, really, really value added. Okay. So I actually started working towards closing the audit. If I have an opening meeting at 8:30 on day one, then I have a facility tour, then I'm back in the conference room to start the audit, say 9 o'clock. I actually start preparing for my closing meeting at 9 o'clock on day one of the audit. Why? Because I know what I'm going to need. I'm going to need a report that's completed. I'm going to need a summary of all of my findings, all of my opportunities for improvement. And also, at a minimum, I have to leave some type of executive summary. Okay, something, whether it's 2 pages, whether it's 5 pages, there's a summary which is going to summarize my overall conclusions and the recommendations that I'm going back to my office or my facility or my registration body with. So I don't want to wait until 4:30 of the last day so I could start putting together my summary. It's been a long week. Did I have 3 findings? Did I have 6? Wait, hold on. I didn't write it as effectively as I should have. The last thing in the world we need is to be scrambling at the last minute, at the last day. That's going to lead to not being able to provide a valuable report. And that's our deliverables, that value report. So as I have a finding through the course of the audit, I'm cutting and pasting things onto my summary. Okay, different opportunity for improvement. It's in my report, but I'm cutting and pasting, I'm putting that. I may see something or an area that's really great and really, really, really valuable. Okay, I'm adding, I'm cutting and pasting. And what that's going to do is it's going to put me so far ahead at the time of the closing meeting to where I've actually got 98% of my executive summary that's well written and well complete. Like I said, I've got caught over the years where it's 4 o'clock, closing meeting at 4:30, and 80% of my summary is still blank. And I'm scrambling through handwritten notes, trying to figure out what I did on day one. Okay, so lessons learned, you learn from that. So day one, start making sure that you understand what your deliverables are. It's going to be an effective closing meeting. It's going to be a completed audit report, and it's going to be a summary, which at a minimum, it's going to include all of the findings and our concern. So we want to make sure that we're ready for that. Yes, you could pull it all together at the end, but it won't be as effective in your deliverables. That final report won't be quite as valuable as it could have been or as it should have been. Okay, in conclusion, our overall intent was to make sure that you understand the planning process. And as you can see, there's a lot of different steps involved. Planning actually starts when we receive that audit authority. If we don't have a good, clear idea of those requirements, where we're going, when, the time limit, what standard are we auditing against, it may be a supplier audit where one of the requirements is going to be auditing against a paint spec or an NPE spec or a welding spec, because a certain company is contracting us to be able to perform that service. So as part of that audit at that supplier, it may include not only ISO Q1 and Q2, but it may very potentially also include a certain paint spec or other critical spec from a customer, because we're having to show that customer that, yes, we do have a supplier that can provide that requirement. During that situation, maybe it may rise to a level to where you have to audit a supplier that is supplying a raw material to that supplier, so you can go back to whoever your customer is and really show that, yes, this supplier is definitely effective in carrying out this process. We have taken the extra steps to audit some of the raw materials and other things that they actually get from some of their suppliers. So we intent, once again, make sure that the audit goes well. We know we're going to start by having a good, clear authority. Our deliverables, we're going to figure out exactly where we're going. We're going to get all our paperwork together, putting together a good audit team, reaching out to the client, completing a good audit report, and basically making sure that everything flows right. We want to prevent embarrassment. We see something during the team that during the audit that, you know what, maybe we needed this, maybe it would have added benefit. Okay, then you bring it next time. Okay, it could be something as simple as you had one ink pen. You're out on the shop floor. It never fails. I'm speaking from experience. You're about 400 feet from the conference room, and this one ink pen gives out. Okay, so you just prepare for that. I can't stress enough that one of the number one things in an audit is to prevent embarrassing situations, because that kind of takes away that professionalism that we're really out there for. So we want to watch for that. We want to make sure customers, company audit facilities are getting a good return on investments. Okay, they're investing a lot in these quality management systems. So we want to make sure the audit is thorough and it's truthful. Everything has to be truthful, but we want to really work hard, and we want to make sure we're extremely detailed, because every opportunity for improvement is more value you're adding to the company. Now, having said that, not every company sees a report with 0 findings, 0 concerns, and you're praising them like they're the greatest company on the face of this earth. Some companies appreciate those kind of reports. There's other companies that I've been to that do not appreciate those reports, because they feel that we didn't work hard enough and we really didn't give them the proper deliverable, which was they were looking for opportunities for improvement. I really didn't give them any good opportunities for improvement. But once again, I can't make things up. I'm just going to audit as hard as I can. I'll be as detailed as possible, because I want to try to my best. Not everything has to be findings. There could be findings, there could be concern, there could be opportunity for improvement. Maybe you end up with a report with 0 findings, but you've got 8, 9, 10 different areas where you're recommending that they improve. That's just about as valuable for a customer. It could be equally as valuable. So we want auditors that are credible. We're doing the right things. You have conflict during the audit. You want to make sure that you take those conflicts in private. The last thing in the world we need is to have auditors that's disagreeing or that's not on the same page whenever we go to the client. Meetings with your team, that's your call. Do you have meetings during the day? Do you have meetings at the end of the day? We just make sure that we're on the same page, and especially if there's a finding, we have to be all in agreement as a team before we tell a client about something. If I've got other team members, I tell them, there's a finding, let me know, take a 5-minute break, do whatever you need. Let me know so we can take a look at it. Let's make sure that we're in agreement. I don't want to learn about that finding at the end of the day when my team member starts reviewing what areas he covered and what issues he may have discovered. That's a little late to learn about it. I want to learn about it right away so we get a chance to really make sure we're all on the same page and we're in agreement as to how we're going to write that finding. Requirements, objective evidence, and exactly why it is a finding. One last thing on conflicts, depending on where you're at. Last thing we need is to be in conflict with the client. The only thing you could do is have a good report that's well written, show that it's credible, and there's always an appeal process. Third-party registration body has them. Depending on how your program is written, then you're going to determine what that resolution process is. It could be something as simple as writing their response or their reason for not agreeing with it, sending back to the organization. Maybe you might have a group or a team that will then look at it and review it before giving them a formal response. The takeaway here is we want to try to agree with everything at the end of the audit. There's going to be those times that we're not able to agree. So you may want to look ahead as to what exactly is the resolution process, because this needs to be resolved somehow. Okay, good with that one. Okay, and Ms. Kayla, you want me? I'm covering this one.
Yes, yeah, if you don't mind, and then I'll
Oh,
go
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. With pleasure. I just don't want to get in trouble. I appreciate it. Okay. This slide here is basically giving you some information on several, I'd say 3, maybe 4 years ago, API started a process where you can become a lead auditor, which could be a very valuable credential to have. So it's on their website. You go to api.org, products, services, and then there's a certification tab that you get to. Basically the 5 things that's listed is the 5 requirements: education, oil and gas experience, QMS, work experience. Those 3 kind of go together because, for a high school education, for example, they're going to require X amount of years of experience. With some formal degree, the experience may be a little less, depending on the education. The work experience, it could also be less. So those 3, there's a chart that you'll see which shows it, but basically there's going to be some education requirements, oil and gas experience requirements, and then QMS experience, whether it's working with quality systems, auditing, just some way, shape, or form, be able to show evidence of that. The special training they require at a minimum is to complete their API lead auditor course, and to complete either their API approved Q1 or Q2 course. So the special training is those, and they do give you an option to show where maybe you've completed those courses somewhere else in some other way, shape, or form, but you'll have to show them that you've met the body of knowledge or the criteria that's in their course, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure that you really understand the ISO 19011 protocol, and they want to make sure that you really understand either the Q1 standard or the Q2 standard. It's the requirement that you actually be against. So all of those, like I said, could be found on the site, and it's going to change the special training and the auditing experience. The special training is the one that really is going to be pretty solid. The education, oil and gas experience, QMS work, and then auditing experience. those will kind of depend on the education and things. So if you'll be able to see the different charts of where you fall, and for depending on educational background, one may require an extra 2 years of all field experience, may require an extra year in QMS, but those are the requirements. And then there's an application process you go through with them. At the end of, but it starts out with the application, and then all of these requirements you would be working through and meeting. And then at the end of everything, there's a test, and they proctor those tests in different areas, so you don't have to go to the office in Washington, D.C. for that. And once that's completed, then they send you your approved lead auditor cert, and it's usually good unless they change the process. It's usually good for 3 years, and then there's a research program. Research is usually X amount of audits and maybe X amount of QMS experience. Mainly X amount of audits is going to be that research that's going to be needed every few years.